philosophy, if I can say that, and has worked with the methods of Rudolf Steiner to see into the supersensible realms. Her book, Nature Spirits, The Remembrance, A Guide to the Elemental Kingdom, is very highly regarded. And she's an accomplished musician, as those of you who were here yesterday will know. And this morning Susan will speak to us on communicating and co-creating with the elemental kingdom. Susan Raven.
Thank you. Well, greetings, everybody. The spirit world is so vast. These invisible realms are so huge and so vast. We need many, many traditions, many views, many paths in order to hold this massive wisdom. We need many voices. So the route I've taken, or that I've found myself on, that I've been led to, is through the work of Rudolf Steiner, who was an extraordinary seer. His capacity to see into the spiritual and supersensible realms was extraordinary. And I found my way to his work when I went to a talk by Sir George Trevelyan. And this was the first time I saw a fiery aura. And he gave the most tremendous talk, and this was the fire that ignited my will to follow this path. And he was late to get back to his train, and something put my hand up. Said, "I'll take you to the station." And I drove Sir George Trevelyan in my tiny little Mini at top speed to Paddington Station, and finally got him onto the train in time. So that was my introduction. And from then on, I attended many lectures and workshops at Rudolf Steiner House, and I came across his lectures called Manna's Symphony, which is about the nature spirits. And these lectures are so exquisite and so beautiful that I read them again and again, and they began to open up this capacity to really feel and sense the nature spirits. And then one day, in a high summer, in the heat of London, on the Marylebone Road, eyes streaming with the pollution, I decided no more in this city. The music and my career as a musician had kept me in London. And the next day we went to Avebury, and just as the sun was going down, we looked over at the remains of a massive crop circle, and I said, "Please, please, may we live somewhere where we can nurture ourselves." And 24 hours later, I received a letter from a friend on the Powys Shropshire border saying, "We're going to be moving. Would you like to move to our house?" So when you get a message that quickly, you need to take it. So, "Ooh, it's too far," or "Forget it," you go. And suddenly, within a few weeks, we were living in this exquisite place where the nature spirits are so vibrant and so strong. And this particular part of the borders was ruled by Ceridwen. Ceridwen and her cauldron of inspiration. And she is a tough, tough teacher. And in the first few months of walking the hills, I nearly blinded myself with a stick in the eye. I was constantly slipping and falling and bruising, and she was a tough initiator. But after a while, she began to gift me with inspiration, that exquisite wind of inspiration that comes through the altar major, behind the head, and expands the mind so that there's space and there's colour, there's imagination, there's inspiration and intuition. And the land, there's this loop of reciprocity that comes between you and the land the more that you walk it. And we've all felt that. And as a songwriter, I was asking her, please help me with my songs. And slowly but surely, the tree spirits, and especially the rock spirits and the water spirits, they began to gift me with the poetry and the music and the tones to really hold the words. I'm truly crafting what I wanted to say, what I felt, and what I felt needed to be said through songs. And as this wonderful relationship began to develop with the land, it was so precious, and it was so deep and warm and true. All of the speakers have spoken about this truth and how important truth is. No masks. You don't wear masks in the landscape. You go to a tree, use eurythmy maybe, just this eurythmy. Go to the tree and say, who am I? Please show me who I am. And the tree tells you the truth. It tells you a truth that you won't find possibly from another human being. And so as this relationship with the rocks, the trees, the streams of this particular area developed, and as I imbued and felt this truth, and as it permeated my thinking, speaking, singing, communicating, I felt this is so rich and this is so important. I must do something. How can I convey this to people who don't understand this or who ridicule nature spirits? Because one can communicate with many, many people who have a real profound love for the earth and do great environmental work. But the minute you say the word nature spirit or elemental, it's this glaze that goes across the eyes. What is that? What lives behind that glaze? And it's fear. It's fear, because there's no such thing as a private thought or a private feeling. Everything sounds on for spirit ears and spirit eyes. And we all know that deeply. And it's fear of the unknown that causes really good, hard-working and wonderful people who are doing environmental work to close off and say, I don't believe. And this perturbed me a lot. And of course, if I would say, well, why don't you read Rudolf Steiner's lectures? And as many of us know, his lectures can be tough going. And they're hard work for a reason, because they mold and craft the soul. The diligence and the perseverance is actually molding and changing one's constitution almost when you get through some of his lectures. not all of them. And there's of course the wonderful work of Dorothy McLean, which is more accessible. But I felt it was really important to write a book that took the essence and the most exquisite quotations from Rudolf Steiner about his nature spirits, and to then craft them with some of the modern quantum physics and the wonderful headway that's being made by many, I call them post-materialist scientists, people like Nassim Haramein. Nassim Haramein, he has the guts to say the words being. He describes the universe as an agency creating beings. And so there's a lot of support now and a lot of scientific initiatives that can help the people who love the land but who fear the nature spirits. So I began this task of writing the book, and it was to try and bridge the gap, to invite people in to have a go at believing. So we could start by what is an elemental and what is a nature spirit? And I walked for many, many hours asking the elementals, who are you and what are you? And we love concepts that fit because our education glorifies the mind. And I sometimes think it's almost a sclerosis of the mind, the way that the sense of feeling and intuiting is not taught, apart from possibly some schools, obviously the Waldorf schools. So I asked the land, what is an elemental? And over a period of time, I had this answer. An elemental is a nexus of subtly primed consciousness and vitality, working at the junction between spirit and matter. Each elemental is charged with a mission. They are created and programmed by a sublime hierarchy of advanced consciousness that is able to create life and give it away. This gift of life radiates down through the octaves of manifestation and out into infinitesimal elemental parts. And they're constantly feeding off this ever-evolving environment of sensing and feeling that we create. Now, some people think about elementals as being really huge beings. For instance, Michael Dunning and his You Mysteries, he speaks about meeting this ferocious and formidable, huge elemental. And some people would call it a nature spirit. But we need to hold these really lightly. We don't need to squash it all down into a spreadsheet. That's not what the elemental kingdom is about. We can't squash it into a spreadsheet. There are different rules. We hold it lightly. But for the purposes of the work I do, I see the elementals as quite small, hard-working, a nexus of subtly primed consciousness working the vital point between spirit and matter, holding things in form. They are the workers at this last junction. Rudolf Steiner has this beautiful phrase which holds this idea so well. What the elemental nature spirits have called into the world is the last reverberation of the creative, formative, cosmic word which underlies all activity and all existence. So there's this unit of primed consciousness. And then if we go and explore into the new ether physics, we come across the work of people like Paul La Violetta. And he talks about an etheron, which is a unit of ether. And so one could speak to some people and talk about an etheron and be, that sounds interesting. And then you talk about an elemental and the eyes glaze over. It's this subtle thing of vocabulary and what people are comfortable with. And Paul La Violetta describes it as a unit of transmuting ether. And these etherons react with one another in prescribed manners and diffuse through space. So it's so close. They're not the same thing. To say they're the same thing is to minimize creation. We don't want to put it into files and spreadsheets, but we hold these things lightly. But for a non-believer, you'd start with an etheron and come round to an elemental. And then if we look at a nature spirit, I see them as huge or big. One could say there's a nature spirit of the tree form. It's an overarching nature spirit that has the undines in the sap, the gnomes in the roots and tree trunks. We have the sylphs in bringing light to the leaves, working with the undines, with that beautiful moulding activity of photosynthesis and with the leaves. And then we have the salamanders who bring the generative warmth to ripen the fruit. So the nature spirit of the tree is looking after all these elementals. One can say that a nature spirit is an organizing intelligence within and behind physical nature that oversees the order and measure of material form and the setting of limits to matter. They oversee the incarnation of an idea into the plant, into its form, and they hold the memory of place. So they're the keepers of the myths, the keepers of the memories, especially the great rock spirits. And the whole universe is a nature spirit. The universe is a life form. It's alive, it imagines, it thinks, and it creates. And it's inhabited by a great choir of creator beings and elementals who animate and organize physical matter in a specific way. Since matter doesn't create form, it fills the space organized by subtle forces. So we have the idea, the process, and the form, and the elementals and nature spirits are the ones doing this work taking the idea which lives up in the cosmos and then bringing it down into the physical form. And we can think about the different forms like the rocks, the streams, the zephyrs, the winds, and the warmth. They're revelations, expressions of matter which appear in space at different speeds of time. And one of the most beautiful questions to put to the physical phenomena out in the landscape, to lie with your head against a huge, great big rock, your head full of all these conflicting memories and emotions, and just say to the rock, please clear my head. And it's like a fomentation as these beautiful, great, cold rocks pull out all this chaos. And then you ask the rock, what time are you in? What time are you in? And to enter into their time is such an exquisite experience. What time are you in? May I enter your time? And then to go to a waterfall. Peter and Sue had the Fairy Glen, that beautiful, wonderful Conway Falls. It's one of our favourite places to go. And I spend time with the waterfall there. And I ask, may I go into your slow time? May I go into your slow time? And you then enter this time when the waterfall completely slows down and you can see the droplets of water and the undines dancing in the water. And as the water falls over, it's slow, and you really begin to enter into the mystery and the wonder of water. So if I go through the four elementals, and again to say four, the four elements, they're all merging in between each other. Everything merges when you go beyond the physical. So we go into the world of the gnomes. Rudolf Steiner describes them as their substance in the supersensible realm as intelligence, highly intelligent. So these great ideas that come through the higher hierarchies and come and filter down into the form, the gnomes are the ones that hold them, hold this intelligence. And that's why we see in folklore they have such big heads. So these old myths and old stories have real truth in them. And the gnomes are they're at their most joyful and in their true element when they're around crystals and when they're around metals. And their substance is this sense and intellect. And they're watching over the dematerializing and materializing of form. And what they do is the plant is like this satellite dish absorbing the starry script, the universal script that is being sent into the earth. And the plants gather all this wisdom and it trickles down into the earth, and the gnomes take hold of this wisdom and they hold it in the earth and they carry it through the earth. And they're the preservers of continuity in solid structures through the course of evolution. So it's very much the gnomes, these great rock spirits that hold the wisdom and the myth. That's their task. But they are beings that are programmed. Now, ideally, they're programmed by what one would call ruling will. This is from the starry script, from the sun, from the higher hierarchies, from the great beings who organize and create. But of course, they are also enchanted into human will. And because they have been ignored, ridiculed, and denied, mostly because they have been denied, they've been left in limbo. They've been left in limbo, and that's why the adversary forces, we could call them, can take hold of the elementals because we ignore them. We deny them, and therefore they are taken hold of, and they have to uphold that which is inimical to life rather than what is life-giving. Over the past few years, I've gathered groups together, and we have done investigations and experiments into some of the dilemmas that I personally and many of us find really deeply and profoundly distressing. And I'm particularly interested in diseases. And I teach this methodology where we summon, let's say we take a tree disease. What's the most prevalent one at the moment is ash dieback. In these gatherings, of experimenting, we summon the tree, this nature spirit of the tree. We summon the nature spirit of the pathogen, the fungi, and the disease itself. And we speak to these beings. Science can take us so far. Science can take us so far, but summoning these beings in a controlled and honourable methodology, we can take science further. We go out into the ether and the astral realms and speak to these beings. In modern sciences, you don't have to particularly use your feelings and emotions. You can close the door at the end of the day and drive away from the laboratory. But the laboratory table now has to upgrade into an altar where the beings of the substances that we are working with join with us as co-creators. We invite them in as teachers, and we take science out. Isabel was talking about this at the end of yesterday. We include the beings in our evolving science. So I'll give you an example. There was 19 of us that gathered to look into ash dieback, and we summoned the spirit of the ash tree, and almost the entire group, we then grounded what we saw on the inner screen when we had summoned the being of the ash. And almost everybody in the experiment drew a tree with a huge sun in the middle of it, because the ash tree is ruled by the sun. We then summoned the being of ash dieback, Kalara Fraxinea. And pretty much everybody also drew this infestation, like black spiders, black elements, suffocation. The word suffocation came through nearly everybody. And then we began to ask in this very reverential way. I mean, these diseases, it's quite easy to be judgmental and really hate them. But they are austere and quite noble beings. And their answer is, we fill the space that you leave behind. We have no choice. We do what we are programmed to do. You programmed us to be who we are. And one of the questions was, why? Why are you here? Why are you here? And more revelations came through, and the strongest one was lying. And again, I'm going to say this word truth. Nearly every speaker at this conference has spoken about the importance of truth. We all have to be guardians at the gate of lies to make sure they don't come through. Because mass lies, and of course in the past 20 years, lies can go around the world within seconds on the internet and create huge, vast thought forms of lies. And these live in the astral realm. So when we have the pure idea of the tree, the solar wisdom coming through to the tree, hits these great thought forms of lies, plus hitting the chemtrails, plus our ignoring and our unloving behavior. Obviously some, not all of us, the unloving behavior towards nature. The diseases have no choice but to manifest themselves. And then how can we help? Was a question. And it's a very simple one. It's love us. Speak to us. And that's what all of you are doing, is walking the land and loving the land. And you are healing it. I write messages on the soles of my shoes. Yesterday I wrote, what did I write on my shoe? Oh, may my footsteps enrich you. May my footsteps enrich you. So these lies, so I'm going to end the talk by saying how important it is that we speak the truth and we carry the truth. I'm going to pick up one quote from Rudolf Steiner about lies. And he's talking about our really ancient ancestors. In those ancient times, a lie had infinitely greater power than it has nowadays. If at the present time everyone who tells a lie were to suffocate as the result, well, I prefer to leave it at that. For I think that the fear of suffocation would be too great to allow people to risk telling lies. I assume that nowadays people will not suffocate, but at that time a lie would have caused actual suffocation. For the thought expressed in the word contained a power to give form to the air in the larynx and then suffocated the man. And the disease, Chlorophrexinea, the Ashteba, is all about suffocation. It suffocates the plant. So, when we walk the land, and we love the land, we love the trees, we dance and sing. Sue and Peter were talking about the drumming and the singing, and Sue was talking about how these sacred places gives her melody, and how the land loves us to sing, and how important ritual is. Create your own rituals. They don't have to be old ones. Let's create new ones. There's one particular one that I teach called The Little Creation that has come out of the Biodynamic Research Institute. A beautiful ritual that rolls out over the land, and it sends out great love and real health-bearing substance over the land. Ritual creates joy and it creates order. Right and proper ruling will order. And we're all doing this. There's more and more of us waking up to do this. And the more we speak to nature, the more we will receive inspiration on how to balance what is impure and what is inimical to life. And I have great hope, and I feel great positivity. The nature spirits are fine teachers. They teach the truth. They teach us in a way that is so direct. So I'm going to close this talk by saying a prayer that I received from the nature spirits helped me to write. A prayer to the nature spirits and elementals. We remember, we are a spirit of nature too. We respectfully seek admittance to your domain, that we may, with grace and reverence, co-create with the beings of your world. In the name of love, we allow you to instruct us, and we prepare a place of warm welcome in our hearts and minds for your world wisdom to enter our soul. May the responsibility it brings ripen our understanding, deepen our feeling, and guide our willing, that we may walk as true human beings through the kingdoms of nature in which we all share the gift of life. Yea, so be it. Thank you. If you like this, if you want that prayer, I'll leave it on here if you want to copy it. Thank you for your listening.